Hello and welcome to finally a new session in the Lighting Academy. Um, yeah, it was sadly again a rather large break this time. Multiple reasons here. I don't want to go too much into detail because it's just like stuff that happens, and it's not my main life goal is doing the lighting academy. I mean, I love doing this for you guys, and I hope you don't get too mad with me for having some delays sometimes. But I mean, I'm just really busy, generally speaking. So sometimes it just really takes me way longer than I thought until I have time again to continue doing some things. So also just before we get things started, the last Lighting Academy, I wanted to do it about the physical lights in 4.19. So the goal there was to have a bit of uh, a special session that kind of just explains some basics about the new systems there. Try to shed some light into certain workflow concepts there and what they could potentially mean. But the problem is I need to be careful how I phrase this. So basically, I did this video already. The problem is I'm not really happy about the implementation at all, like the way the new exposure values and light values are being handled. And to be honest with you guys, the last time I recorded this video, it just ended up being 1.5 hour rant. Not a full rant, but basically when I just rewatched the video, I was like, shit, I can't put that out because I got very agitated. I got very emotional as well. In a sense of like, I just got really mad and really pissed. And I said a few things that I probably shouldn't have said, which is the reason why I didn't feel comfortable in releasing the video. Because, let's be honest, I mean, we should all at least have some sort of professional behavior here. So, of course, just like being a dick and blaming people doesn't help anyone. I'm not saying that I did that, but I was just like very angry in my way of saying things and very frustrated with a lot of stuff going on. And that is also um, part of how Epic sometimes generally handles features inside of Unreal. So, long story short, I got really mad. I was not happy with the video and the content, so I decided to not put it out. And it just took me a while to have time again to do it. So, here we are again. I'll try to be less angry this time, and I'll try to not curse all the time because of getting mad or something like that. So let's keep this cultivated. Let's talk about the stuff in a rather neutral way, and I'll try my best to explain to you how I believe the system is meant to be used, or what Epic kind of intended to do that way. So yeah, let's see if we can shed some light into this. So, before we get this started, as always, Lighting Academy, everything that I'm about to say is my opinion and it's my experience. So nothing is like set in stone, and it's not like the ultimate way of doing things. And of course, I really don't want to give the impression of that I'm always right. It's just this is the way I feel about these things. So take from it what you want. With that out of the way, I have this little test scene here. So you might see this guy and you might think this is familiar, and that's because it's the guy from the Dark Souls scene. And this is also the Dark Souls project. So it just made like this little test scene here. Used the sky, and I just like built this little thing here, which you can see. And so the goal is basically what I want to do in this test scene is I want to get some balanced lighting that has outdoor lighting combined with interior lighting, and I basically want to combine that and kind of like talk about local light values, which is what has changed, and the exposure settings. And yeah, we will most likely discover a few interesting things along the way. So, just regarding some of the settings, if we look at the skylight, we can see I increased the cube map resolution. I'm using captured scene. I actually want to use static as well. I don't use lower hemisphere black because I want to sample the ground color here. If we look at my directional light, what do we have? Yep. So I got the settings like this. Really not much tweaking going on here. I increased the dynamic shadow distance to 12,000. That gives me kind of like some sort of soft shadows. Not right now here because it's unbaked, so the cascaded shadow maps are not working in the sense they will later, because now it's just a dynamic preview. But we don't really care. The sky dome is our sphere as always, and I have this material here, which you can see. And I think I should probably use yeah, sorry, I was confused. Yeah, so I got a sky instance here, which is my shader. I can just tweak the brightness. And that's it. So, the problem now is that many people started looking into these values and how to set them up. And right now, if we look at the post-process volume, and we now have these settings arranged like this. We have camera and we have exposure. Before that, we didn't have camera. We just had exposure. And you know, you have like your settings here. It was always kind of like that. The big problem though in my experience is basically these are the values that we use to control our exposure. So we have a min brightness of 0.03 and a max brightness of 2. So what does that actually mean? And to understand that, what we first need to do is we need to bake this, because you can see the bake is broken. So we just quickly need to get this running. I swapped around light map resolutions, which is why this is broken. But it doesn't matter too much. Also, like if you look at my quality settings, it doesn't really matter too much. I have to say though one thing. I'm using Luo Shuang's GPU Lightmass. So if we go into the forums and we go into rendering, and I mean, you should probably know that Luo Shuang is like a common guest on the Lighting Academy with his tools. So like last time I used his multi-bounce skylight, and now I'm using his multi-bounce skylight including GPU Lightmass. I mean, the skylight is multi-bounce now anyways, but there is GPU Lightmass. It's this thread here, Luo Shuang's GPU Lightmass. And honestly, that stuff is the shit. I mean, that's basically what we always wanted, because photon mapping actually is not that great. Also in terms of like how certain things were solved quality-wise. And you might remember that you got seams between like modules and stuff like that, because it was like calculated on different threads, and then like you got mismatches between repeating modules on a wall. So basically 2 wall modules next to each other would like still have a little seam between them, because they were having a different shade. This is all gone with GPU Lightmass, and as you can see, it looks killer in comparison, because it's just doing way more accurate tracing. So you can see this is photon mapping, and you can see the seams and the quality, and this is the ray tracing. And the funny thing is, like, you get these settings out of the box with ray tracing, and those settings are basically the same as you would use photon mapping in Unreal, but you would crank up these values like architectural visualization. Remember when I did the ArcVis tutorial, I used like 0.1 static lighting level scale and indirect lighting quality of 10 and all those things, and then the bake takes like 3 hours. You don't have to do that anymore because basically the GPU Lightmass already has that high quality setting and it's so much faster. It's incredibly fast. It bakes everything on the GPU. You do need a little bit more graphics card memory depending on the size of the scene, and it's still like in, let's call it early access. But I recommend everyone to try it out. I'm using this, so let's see how this actually looks if I do a production bake on basically max quality. So now we should get the GPU Lightmass thingy. Yep. So they layer. Yep. And now you can see like how fucking fast that thing is. It's like really, really, really nice. Just like look at it. It says like, okay, now I'm gonna be done in 24 seconds. And just so you know, me using GPU Lightmass is not really important for anything that we're doing right now. So even if you don't have GPU Lightmass, that's not an issue because we're not talking about baking quality. We're talking about values here. So, all right, and you can see that looks really good for such a quick bake already. It's really nice. And you can see you get like tons of cool indirect shadowing from it. It's really good. I would really recommend for everyone to try out the ray traced baking. All right. So now what you can see is that we have this kind of thing of the auto exposure like constantly adjusting the image, right? So you can see how it's getting brighter and now it's getting darker. And that is because here is more brightness, so the histogram has to adjust less. To show that, we can go into the developer features. I always forget where it is. Visualize HDRI adaptation. So sadly, this whole screen doesn't tell you like a lot, but it can be helpful. So you can see how this is where the value of the scene is when I look in here, and now it's trying to adjust the exposure to that. And when I look back here, you can see here is way more brightness, and that's kind of like what we see when we use this, and how we are adjusting. So I can basically, by min brightness, you can see how I get brighter. But if I set min brightness to like 0.5, you can see how it kind of looks off at this. So the thing is, this is how we used to do exposure. So we just threw in some like values, and we're like, oh, I have the emissive of my sky dome is 1, and this seems to kind of look okay. And if I go in here, this seems too dark, so I don't know, maybe I go in here and I do like this, and yeah, now it's okay. This is how we used to work, okay? So of course I exaggerated this a bit, but the thing is, you had absolutely no knowledge or control of what all these things mean. And then we also get into another one that is fairly tricky, which is the local lights. So before we had unitless, that is what the old units were. And the funny thing is, the old units were supposed to be lumens. So unitless is now lumens. But there is still lumens as well. So the thing is, basically, the Epic guys, they at some point they said like, hey, we fucked it up, and we told you that our default units for the lights are lumens, but they're actually not. They're actually 6 exposure stops off to what they should be. Very confusing. So what they did was they said, okay, we're gonna change how exposure works, and we're gonna change how our local light units work. And if you want to have the default behavior of Unreal that we had all the time, you just use unitless, and then your exposure and all those settings, they work just like this here. They're just like you used to work. Nothing changed. So basically what you can see here, I have my sky with intensity 1. I have my sunlight with intensity 3.1. And I have a local light here. And usually like a light bulb that you would have in your living room is around 900 to 1,000 lumens. So we can turn this on. And this kinda feels okay-ish. Alright? So we could say that if we would continue to use the arbitrary system from Unreal, we kinda get something to work. So the problem now is that it still doesn't really have any proper consistency, and it still feels random in many, many ways. And there's also another problem. This whole workflow can make that certain things are not bright enough. To illustrate, if you give something emissive, for example, emissive, it feels brighter the more it blooms. And the more it blooms, you need to expose it differently. So basically, if you have something with an emissive value of 1, it doesn't really bloom a lot. But if you change your exposure and lift it, it starts to bloom more. The problem is you could also just increase the bloom instead of changing the exposure. So you can make it look the same even though its physical value has not the same intensity. And that is a problem. And that can make stuff look unbalanced. And that is one of the reasons why, personally, I feel that using physical values can be very, very, very helpful. There's also another reason why I think physical values are super helpful. So, to illustrate why so many people are most likely having issues with the whole new unit system, I would like to show you how I personally would love to build my lighting inside of Unreal. So, by the way, this is the thread here about the physical lights, where I explain how I would do certain things and how I would see certain things work, And I'll always talk about the Sunny 16 rule. And there's a reason for that. As probably many of you know, I'm working on the Star Wars Battlefront games, and lighting-wise, obviously those games are kind of like a super good showcase for lighting as well. And when we started thinking about how to tackle the lighting for Battlefront, we had to kind of establish certain rule sets that made it possible to have many different lighting conditions, but basically always treat things kind of in the same way. And so what we decided was the first Battlefront was basically using exposure like this here, like in Unreal, Like we just had like some arbitrary exposure values, and even though we had physical-based rendering, we didn't really have like a physical-based camera. So it was kind of like just eyeballing values. But for the new Battlefront, we decided to actually really use physical exposure values. And to illustrate that a bit, so this is basically a screenshot of Naboo. And what we the way this kind of works is basically you do like backwards engineering, right? So before you start working, you have a concept art, and you don't really have like I mean, of course we had movie reference as well, but I mean, maybe you guys would agree with me that the prequel trilogy doesn't really look that good anymore if you look at it like from a very neutral perspective. The special effects, they don't hold up anymore, and a lot of things they like Naboo stuff, for example, it feels kind of washed out if you watch it today. So it lacks a certain vibrance and all that. But of course, you can see where this should kind of like the direction where it should go to. And then you get like your concept artists, and they start like painting some stuff, and then you get like basically something like this, but as a concept. And then what we at DICE did, we went out and we measured certain things. So, for example, we measured sky brightness with a luminance meter. So we kind of know a couple of things, right? So we have certain data, and I can show this to you here, right? So, like, for example, we know that if we have a really bright sunny day, we know that the sunlight's intensity is about 125,000 lux. That is like the intensity value of the sunlight. We also know, based on what we measured, that usually sunlight intensity varies between around 30,000 lux and the mentioned 125,000 lux, depending on what like time of day it is, and like all those different things, you know. And then we also measured sky luminance, and we know that if you have a very blue and strong sky, that this is around 5,000 candela per square meter if you like, you know, take a median value that you measure across the sky. We also know that some clouds, like really white clouds, like, like kind of like that what we see here, these white clouds on a really bright day, they can reach up to 10,000 candela per square meter. All right? So now that we have that data, we also have some other data, which was just on a page earlier, which is our Sunny 16 rule here. Well, I thought I had a bigger image. So, and the thing is, like, this is a rule that has been established by photographers and video people across the world. And it holds up fairly well. And this rule basically is there to help you when you want to shoot certain scenarios to choose the right settings so you actually see your stuff in a nice way. So what this one says is, for example, a hard sun setting, like a really strong summer day, like super hot summer day. You want to choose an f-stop on your camera of like 16. And f-stop in that sense for us equals EV. All right? So f16 would be EV16. And then you want to have an ISO of 100 and a shutter speed of 125th of a second. Okay? And if you have those values set on your camera, you will get a pleasing image. So what that means is, if we go to Naboo, Naboo is probably not Sahara. So it might not be fully f16, right? Where did I lose my stuff now? Oh, I'm on page. To go page 2. So yeah, this is probably not like f16. I would say this is probably f14 maybe. All right. So what we basically can do is we can take the Sunny 16 chart, and the first thing that we can do is we can configure our camera to match the light setting that we would basically try to take an image of, right? So if we do that here in Unreal, we have these new camera settings here. So what we need to do is we need to switch to manual. Okay? And now you can see everything is black. And we don't care about that for now, because that's great. We would just set our physical camera, right? So now we know if we go back, we want a ISO 100 and a shutter speed of 125. So we go back. We have ISO 100 and shutter speed is at 60 right now, so we want to put that on 125. Okay? And now we have the f-stops. And the f-stops, we're gonna use 14. Okay? I'm telling this now because obviously I also have some sort of experience with it. So we are, for this kind of setting of this intensity that we have it in Naboo screenshot here, this is around f14, between f11 and f16, where we have hard sun and soft sun. So that's like in the middle of hard and soft sun. Great. So now we have a problem. And that problem is we don't see anything. And that is because now we know that actually everything in the scene that we are using is not strong enough. So we just basically, we don't see anything because we don't fill the scene with enough light. So now what you would probably instinctively, like, you would go to the skylight and you would probably, oh man, I need to crank up the skylight intensity. Yeah, but nothing is happening. Can I push it to 50? Ah, nothing's happening. 100? Nothing is happening. Well, of course nothing is happening. Because it's set to captured scene, and my sky dome is not emitting enough light for the skylight to be captured. So that means I actually need to brighten my sky dome, because it's just way too dark. So what I'm gonna go is I'm just gonna go into my sky brightness multiplier, and I'm just gonna drag the slider. And can you see how the exposure changes here in the preview? Can you see how basically the more bright I make the sky, the darker the background gets, because it's like trying to compensate for the sky brightness, and now it's kind of like hits the maximum EV value, and now the sky is just gonna blow out more while this one is gonna get dark. So now you can see something interesting. I'm on 58 multiplier, and you can see a sun is starting to appear. Do you see that? And that is because this HDR image has such a high dynamic range that this sun is super high as a value. Like, you know, if like all the visible values would be between 0 and 1, that sun is probably a couple of thousands. It's just so much more than 1 as a value, because it's an HDR file. So now I'm just sliding, and yep. Now we can see something. Cool. So now there are two ways of doing this. And I mean, like, setting this value. The first way is the Unreal way of doing it, and that is kind of like eyeball it, because that's my big problem with Unreal. There is a lot of stuff doesn't work the way you think it should, and that basically means that you again have to eyeball stuff instead of like really using proper values. So what this means is, like, now I have locked my exposure at EV14. So I really don't care about inside, outside, whatever. I just care about outside, sunny, this setting, and I'm gonna make this setting look good only. So basically what I can do now is I can just slide this around until everything kind of looks pleasing in a way I would want. So this is actually what I consider to be the perfect sky brightness for like EV14 kind of ish. At least visually, this looks pleasing. So that is one way of doing it. And now you can see I actually multiplied the sky up by 68,000. But it doesn't matter, because this number has absolutely nothing to say. The only thing that matters is what we see here, right? And that is basically what I do at work as well. I set the camera and then I increase the brightness of the sky until the sky emits enough light to be visually there. And that's what we just did. So now the funny thing is, like, I do have some sort of measuring tools to my hand that allow me to check an area of sky and get like a median value of brightness from it. Sadly, you can do something similar in Unreal, but sadly not over an area. You can only do it per pixel. And that's very bad, because I really don't care about this one pixel up here. What I care about is, like, how much light do I get from, let's say, this piece of sky, or from this piece of sky. I would like to have an area and then get a median value of brightness from that area. But sadly, that's not possible. So what can we do? We can go to Window, Developer Tools, and then we can open up the Pixel Inspector. And the Pixel Inspector lets us really effectively just hover over a pixel, and then we get values for that pixel. And what we also get is we get the HDR luminance in candela, candela per square meter. Sorry. And that is exactly what we want, because remember, when we looked at this here, we kind of know that, like, this sky for this setting should be around 5,000 candela per square meter. I would say, since this sky is a little bit more cloudy, I would say it should probably be around 3,500, 4,000 candela per square meter. So what we do is we start the Pixel Inspector, and now you can see there is an HDR luminance value. All right. And now what we can basically do is we can hover over stuff with the mouse and get this value. Yeah. And the problem now is, again, that we're getting a per pixel value. And you can see that here, for example, on the dark cloud, we're getting around 5,500. Here on the white cloud, we're getting a lot more. If we turn around here, we're getting 2,800. Here we're getting 7,500, 6,000. So actually, we should lower the brightness a tiny little bit of the sky. Maybe like this. So now we are around 4,000, 5,000, 2,500, 3,900. I'm specifically not measuring the blue stuff because the blue is always brighter. Like daylight sky, like here, you can see it's around 10,000 candela. That's perfectly fine, because you want to see the difference between a blue sky and a clouded sky. Clouded sky is always less intense if it's thick clouds, but if it's like super white and puffy clouds, then it can be very intense, like you see here. But again, this is a per pixel value, so it's not really that great, because you can see how the values jump around. So you really want to take a median value of an area of sky. So hopefully Epic implements that as a measuring feature, that you can basically just click and drag or something and get a square and measure the brightness for that, because that would help tremendously. But all in all, I would say this is kind of like how I would want my value to look. Okay, so now let's quickly save this. And yep. And now let's do a bake and see what we get here. So now what we should actually have is we should obviously get a quite dark interior with such an exposure value. Yeah, I really like that GPU Lightmass. Very clean and very fast. And I also like this new build monitor. It's just gives you a lot more detail and an ETA, which the Swarm Agent does not. But I think also the Swarm Agent hasn't received an update since Unreal 3, I would say. So now we can actually see a couple of cool things. First of all, this house back here probably has white paint that is very similar in brightness to this wall. And you can see that this house is way brighter than my wall. And that is because this house is actually hit by the sun. My house is not hit by the sun because we don't have a sun yet. And this house back there is not hit by the sun directly, and actually they match up pretty perfectly. Right? And this one is probably also having like a more or less white paint, I would say. So it actually kind of like matches up quite nicely. So now if we go in here, we obviously get this. And that is just what happens. So this is what you have, right? In real life as well. So if you adjust your camera for like, hey, I'm gonna make this shot outdoors with the sky looking like this, and you know, then that's what you're gonna get inside. So what you want to do is you want to adjust the exposure for an interior scenario. And usually, if you check this one again, you can see that we are usually around something between F5 and F8 for indoor. Of course, it says cloudy here, but again, I've worked with this quite a bit. And usually, like shade and indoor is between F5 and F8. So if it's very cloudy, you almost have no difference between indoor and outdoor in terms of those brightness levels. It's way more overcast, and the difference is not as crazy as if it's really sunny. So I usually start around F7-ish, kind of, to see what I'm getting. So if you just put in 7 now, you can see we instantly get this, and it looks a lot more pleasing. So we also get this, which is kind of what you're getting when you do these things, right? You start kind of like when you raise the exposure to make a nice image for like your living room, you start blowing out the exterior. So that's perfectly normal. So a lot of times these Archviz images, they are like 4.6 or 2.8, like even like this, but now you want to adjust like maybe your shutter speed or something like that. But of course, like this is also talking camera now. You might want to have a way faster shutter speed even. And of course, if you lower that, it gets even brighter. So, upsala. So I think like around 4.6 might kind of be the sweet spot for now for this. All right. So, and that is actually how you kind of like can balance this out and have like an indoor exposure that matches like real world values and an outdoor exposure that kind of makes sense as well. So that is really, really cool. And I really like that this is working. And I think this is a huge step forward. And it's really fun to work like that because you can kind of balance your values out and you can see it just like works. It makes sense and it works and it's consistent. So now let's get a little bit onto the problem side. First of all, I still like, for me, it feels that some of these stops feel off a little bit. Let's try to bring in our sun. And I'm gonna wait a second. I'm gonna go into the post-process volume, and I'm gonna go back to 14. And we're gonna go to our sunlight. And now what I know is I really need a strong sun for this. So apparently the sun now uses lux. That's the official statement from Epic about like, okay, the sunlight is actually using lux now. So that means I should be super fine going for 125,000, right? Boom. So there is a really, really bright sun. Okay. And now you can see that we're kind of like, all right. So, but we're probably not on 125,000 because we're still a little bit in a different scenario than the Naboo one, right? So I would say this might actually be around 75,000. And now you can see that we are aligning these two colors also a lot better. The house back here and our house, basically. So 75,000, all great. And this seems to kind of work, which is nice. So let's just quickly save this. And rebake and see how much we get from it. And in case you're wondering why I'm not checking the box that basically prevents this pop-up, I'm not checking it because last time I checked it, I still got the pop-up. And I tried that multiple times, so something is just weird with that pop-up for GPU Lightmass. So no matter what, it's always gonna turn up. Alright. So now we got a lot more light because now we got some sunbounce coming in here as well. Looking good. Kinda curious what happened to my reflection capture. Okay. So this is very interesting. And that could potentially be a fuck up. So I noticed several issues with the new exposure stuff. So for example, I had like really big quality issues with screen space reflections at some point. I mean, here you can see those are SSR right now. So it kind of like seems to work decent. I had really a lot of issues on the reflections of the metal parts here. And right now you can see that even though I have a local reflection, like a box capture here, can you see how it's affecting the glass, but it's kind of like not doing anything to the metal? And honestly, the last time I didn't have that. There was no weird issues with the metal. And you know, it's kind of like I don't really know why this is broken now, but it seems like a value issue, you know, like it seems like maybe something that's being captured is like not strong or too bright or like whatever, and then it's like not enough value-wise to make the metal actually pop. And there are several other problems, like the bloom convolution, for example, doesn't work with these strong values and the physical exposure as well. So there are a couple of problems that I realized when using these values. So Epic needs to fix some things as well, because no matter what, I can't get them to work. Okay, so anyways, now we have baked our sunlight, which works nice as well. And the value also makes sense, so it's not like a completely random value. And if I just go into this again, we can see now that we have the sun bounce, and Jesus Christ. Okay, now there's some more. So see, like, this is all the stuff, like, now I don't know why the reflection suddenly is kind of doing something more, but it still looks super weird. So this is something that needs to be, like, debugged. And now you can see we're a lot brighter than before. So now with the sun, we actually... Oops, hold on. So, 6, 7... So with the sun, we actually might be better off using like an exposure value like this. Okay? So this is all very great. And now let's talk about the first problem. So the first problem is, this is using the camera tweaks, right? So, but what you want is, you want to have a min and max brightness for gameplay, because when you have gameplay and you out here, you want that it's using, like, let's say 13, right? And then you look here and you're like, oh, this is dark, and then you go in and then you want the exposure to adjust to 7. And the same when you go out again, you want to adjust the exposure back to, let's say, 13. Okay? And the problem is, you can't do that here. You can only do it here. But, and now this is why I was so angry the last time, here it's using these arbitrary values again. You have to use auto exposure, and then, like, I cannot put in 7 here and 13 here. But this is what I want to do, you know, this is what I expect. I expect these values to be the same values as these values, because otherwise the guy who's lighting the level will use these values, and then the guy who's lighting the cutscene will use completely different values, and those people, they will not work together. They will screw each other over with changing and messing with their lighting values. One guy has an emissive value like this, and it looks good because he uses this kind of stuff, and the other guy tweaks the emissive to be 5 times stronger because he uses this shit. And I got really, really mad, because I was like, this whole mismatch of values is basically asking for troubles between different lighting artists on a team. It's basically asking for mess ups, and I don't understand why Epic did this. I was just like, why are you doing this? This whole thing is the most unintuitive piece of garbage, sorry. It's like, because it means nothing. It has no relationship to any of those values. It's completely just like, hey, we just defined this range, and then, yeah, tweak it until you visually think it's kind of correct. But I think it's so bad. It's really, really, really bad. And it makes me angry that they implement this thing, but then they don't implement it here. So in the end, it's not usable, because it's like you can either do this or the other one, but nothing works together. And you might have heard me for many times saying that I am a big fan of systemic approaches. I want things to work together in a smart way. I want things to connect and build upon each other. I don't want to have everything as its own little custom solution. I think that's really, really, really bad. And to add to that problem, now we're gonna get a fuck up as well because of our local lights. So let's imagine we have this scenario, and you are going to take a picture on your living room, And this is the weather outside. And so what you probably gonna do is you probably gonna do something like, let's say this. And then you have a light source here in your living room, right? And that light source is probably gonna use like it's a point light most likely. And let's say it's the same light source that I have in my living room, and then it's about 900 lumens. So let's go into lumens. And okay, so do you see it? So now it's off, now it's on, now it's off, now it's on. Okay. This feels so wrong. I can barely describe to you how wrong this feels. Because if I would take a photograph in my living room with these lighting conditions at f8, yeah, the light bulb in my living room would probably look like it would more or less look like this, or like more like this, okay? But this is 35,000 lumens. So why do I need to input 35,000 lumens for a 1,000 lumen light bulb that should look like this with these exposure settings? And that is the thing that I'm not getting. Even if I just put 1,000 lumens in here and I tweak the exposure even further, let's go with 5. And I still like take the light source here, and do you see that? Like there's almost nothing is happening here. So if we just go back to our sunlight, and let's just turn it off. And let's save everything. And let's just quickly bake this out this way. And this is what I mean, you know, like this drives me nuts. I mean, like, why would I implement physical values if this shit wouldn't work? And that is why everyone is struggling so much, because it feels so weird. And I will show you something else after this bake, because we can also change the light units to candela. And the funny thing is, if I Google for a light bulb and I use the candela values inside of Unreal, it actually looks more true to what I believe it should look like than if I use the lumen values. For some people, I don't know if you actually know the difference between lumens and candelas, but it might actually be related to that fact as well. So now you can see, so now I baked 1,000 lumens, and you can see I just get this super tiny little dot up here and nothing. Like, I don't see anything. Like, again, I would expect this to be like, not like this, but more like 30, 25. So something like, yeah, so something like this is the illumination, whoopsala, that I would expect from this, right? So let's do a test. Let's go for Philips light bulb. Whoops. Let's just search for one that could actually be one of the ones that I had. I hate these Swedish results. I have my my Google is in German, but for some reason I don't know. So let's, I don't know. What should we do? Should we go with United States? All right. Yes, great. So let's go in here. I think we have these ones. Or maybe not. Let's check these. It's kinda one of these, I think. So, and of course the cool thing is you can check like all the data here, right? So the cool thing is, first of all, you can actually see the color temperature, which is very, very nice. So we got around 2700 Kelvin on this light bulb. So we can actually immediately do that. And we can say use temperature 2700. And look how orange that is. And that is also interesting because this gives you the realistic contrast of color. Usually people don't make the lights orange enough. Actually, our lights that we use, all the warm lights, they're super orange. They're incredibly orange. And most people don't make them as orange because they feel like it looks super orange. But you know what? That's why you got white balance. So when you basically have a camera and you take a picture of a room like this, you know, what you would usually do is you would go into the white balance and then drag it into this direction. See, so to offset it towards blue, basically, kind of, right? So that's how you would use the white balance for Arcvis to compensate for these super orange light sources. So anyways, so we got the correct color. And now I am... So that is interesting. Because I don't see any brightness here now. Last time I checked the Philips website, they actually had the data here. Let's do this. Which one was it? A19? Oh, E26. E26. So here you can see that they actually put this in lumens, right? So you can see like this one has 1500 lumens. But I'm really trying to find the candela rating. So, because, long story short, what I was trying to explain, lumens is tricky because basically lumens is let's use the greatest program of all times. So Candela, if you have a light bulb, right, and then it just emits light. What we measure in candela is how strong is this light source. What we measure in lumen is how strong is the emitted light. And that's a difference, because basically if you have a light bulb like this and you have a lampshade that cuts this thing off here, then the light only emits in this direction and not in these directions. So this light has, let's say, 1000 CD. Woohoo! I'm good at writing with the mouse. So this has 1000 candela. And this light has also 1000 candela. But this light here has, I'm just making up numbers because I don't know the relationship, has 1000 candela and 2000 lumen. Okay? And this light has 1000 candela, but only 1000 lumen, because half of the light's energy is being shielded off by the lampshade. So it's actually just emitting half of the light. The other one is just eaten away up here. So basically, lumens is the emitted light, while candela is the intensity at the source, no matter how much of it is masked away. So theoretically speaking, candela is the better value to use, because it ignores if the light source is being covered. It just really is the pure intensity of the light source, which it kind of makes it weird that the specs of the lamp are made in lumens, because it's basically already taking into consideration that the light source is not emitting in this other direction, right? But we just actually really care about the core brightness. So let's try Uppsala. The thing is, I saw it. I was at the Philips website somewhere on something, and I was able to see candela ratings, because the thing is, like, it makes it easier for us to understand that. But anyways, if we would say 1500 lumens in candela, let's just try that. That's exactly candela to lumens. No. See, this is the thing, like, it actually makes no real sense to do it the other way around, because basically you mask off the light, because that's why you had to have the enter apex angle in degrees. So I guess that's 180 was that other one. Let's try this one. So we got 1500 lumens, and if we take the angle of this light bulb that we just saw, I mean, is kinda 180 degrees, right? So I would say let's try that. Lumen to candela. So now you can see that would be, wow, that is a lot of candelas. So let's try what happens when we do this. So this is the fun part, right? Because we totally don't know what's gonna happen. So let's put this to candelas. And now we can see that 16,000 is super bright. So if we put this one in, that is gonna completely destroy everything. So this apparently makes no sense. Let's see. what we get when we do 20,000 candela. Okay, see, so now I just eyeballed it. So if we have a light with 20,000 candela that has a has like 180 degrees of like where it emits the light, which is kind of like this, right? It like emits 180 degrees cone, so to speak. Then this would be 1,256 lumens. So I guess what we want is kind of like whoopsala. I guess what we want is 18,000 candela. Oh wait, was I doing like 200? Wait, I was doing 20,000 candelas in lumens. Oh, Jesus Christ. Okay, so actually, sorry. I was using 200,000 candela in lumens, was 1,000. So let's try then 180,000 candela in lumen. So we're getting closer and closer. You know what? I'm gonna try 360 because I'm using a point light. See, so this makes more sense now. So let's go to maybe 120,000 candela. And now we're on 1,500. So let's try 95,000. Ah, almost 90,000. So I think this is a more 75,000. Okay, cool. So this is what I want. I have an angle of 360 degrees because I'm using a point light. All right. And I'm gonna use 75,000 candela, which would equal 942 lumens. So first of all, now let's get something interesting. Let's do 942 lumens. Alright, so this is what 942 lumens looks like, okay? And now we're gonna do a comparison. Alright, so that's 942 lumens. And the exact same value in candela is 75,000. So let's switch this baby to candelas. And you can already see it's brighter. But this is actually what I think the 942 lumens should look like. And now we have to do 75,000. And now we get this. So how the fuck does this make any sense? And this is my problem. Yeah, so this is my problem. We're having these values, but they don't work with each other. Like, this light, like, first of all, why is there the difference between these values that should actually be equal? So if I have a light emitting light in 360 degrees and it has an intensity of 75,000 candela, which is 942 lumens, why don't they look the same? So that's the first question. I mean, the thing is, maybe someone knows. So please, if you know something about those things, please enlighten me. If that formula is wrong, please enlighten me. If you can't do this at all, please enlighten me. I don't know. But to me, this whole workflow just feels super weird, and I'm having this hard time of values not being aligned with each other. And now here you start seeing these issues. Those are the SSR fuck-ups that I was saying that you can see here now. Where screen space reflections are doing like weird stuff and you know, and because the values are too high basically, right? So that's the problem. And honestly speaking, I love this system if it works. I'm a super huge fan of it. And I think for exterior, it actually does work quite well. But my problem is it instantly falls apart as soon as you want to use local lights. the values don't really seem to be coherent with each other, and they don't really seem to work well with each other. And what that means is that you're back again to eyeballing. And I would have loved if it wouldn't have been like that. So my 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 urge to Epic is kind of like, please guys, talk to people. Talk to people that are working with these things before releasing features that in the end no one understands them and has issues using them. And this is not me trying to blame anyone. It is just so frustrating. If you have anything to say to this topic, please go to this thread. There is one official reply from Epic, and sadly that reply doesn't really help, and it's on page 2. And we have been continuing to point out issues and asking for feedback for 3 more pages, and Epic still hasn't replied to this. They seem to be brushing this under the rug, and it makes me very sad and very angry, because I love Epic and I love Unreal, and that is the reason why I'm doing the Lighting Academy. But if stuff like this continues to happen, I might at some point, like, maybe at some point I just don't want to do the Lighting Academy anymore, because it makes me mad that I have been asking for something like that for a very long time, like 3 years or something like that. I have been asking for this, and when you finally get it, it's like nothing what you wanted, and that could have been prevented if they would have asked some more people for feedback, or if they would have released this as a experimental feature and then gathered feedback from the community on it and then improved it before shipping it. But now you actually can't even really use it because it generates visual bugs as well. So this whole thing just seems to be so unfinished and rushed, and it makes me very sad and it makes me very angry. Also because you guys have been asking me to explain it to you. And the thing is, I can kind of explain it to you, but also not in total, because it doesn't seem to work. And also, one of the downsides of that is I cannot recommend you guys to use this. I would love to recommend to use this, because I think it's a great workflow, but not in this kind of buggy state where these values don't line up and where it still has visual glitches and stuff not working correctly, and especially not as long as the auto exposure follows the same value schemes and the same methods, And yeah, long story short, this is my opinion on the new physical values. I think they're great, and they're a super important tool for getting things done in a nice way, but they are implemented in a horrible way right now. And Epic needs to talk to us, and Epic needs to step up instead of fucking hiding. And I really don't mean that in a mean way. I want to talk to you guys. Let's sort this out as a community. There are no hard feelings here, but there will be if stuff like this continues. And that's what we should all prevent as a community. So if you have any feelings in regards to this topic, then please go into the forum and voice your opinions. Poke Epic as much as possible to get a fucking statement out what's going on with this stuff. And please, if you also find ways of working with this or make it more consistent, let me know as well, because we're all one community, and this is like one of the moments where we should actually stick together and help improving Unreal all together for everyone involved. So, yeah, I think that is actually it for this session. Basically, this is how I like to build my lighting. I always start like that from scratch. I always start with the exposure values and the camera values, and then the rest. And I think it's a very, very nice workflow that I really appreciate, and I love doing it like this. And I would obviously love to work in a similar fashion in Unreal if the tools provided would allow it. So yeah, that's it. I think I was way less angry and more relaxed than last time. So I think this video still was informative for you guys. I hope you still learned something from it and were able to, like, take something with you from all the stuff I was explaining and showing here. So yeah, let's hope we can fix these things, make them better in the future. Seriously, get GPU Lightmass. It's super cool. And also give feedback to Luo Shuang. So we will get GPU's Lightmass quickly in the future inside Unreal. Yeah, cool. I hope you enjoyed it. I will continue, obviously, with the Dark Souls environment with the next session. And I also hope it won't be taking me too long. I really have a lot going on right now. So I'm not sure yet how this will work out, but I'll promise I'll keep pushing for it. So yeah, have a really good time, and thanks for watching. See you with the next sessions. And one last thing, if you like my content, please consider dropping by Patreon or just like sending a few bucks via PayPal me. It helps me keep my gear up to date. So yeah, we can all benefit from this. Have a great time. See you around, guys. Cheers.